Hey guys, Jake here. An alpha warrior excels in battle, and the king rewards him with his own lands where he meets his future wife. The anime begins with a knight named Diaz standing still, taking in the vastness of the open field, before telling us that the territory he was given contains nothing but grass. He mentions that about a month ago he was forced onto a carriage departing from the capital. As soon as they arrived, the driver asked him to get off. Through this we learn that Diaz is an orphan, and it was assumed that a desolate field would suit him perfectly. Who would even think that was a good idea? Anyway, before leaving, the driver hands him a map showing the boundaries of his territory along with the inventory granted to him by His Majesty. This grassland is called Nezros, and from this day forward the knight will be known as Diaz Nezros. With that, the carriage departs and Diaz wanders through his territory. He explains that His Majesty granted him this land as a reward for his service in the war, though he has no idea what he's actually supposed to do with it. He was simply sent here with his weapons, and his only assigned duties are to live there, protect his people, collect taxes, and hand them over to the king. After this, he goes to get water, and fortunately, the river water is clean, since during the war, he often had to drink muddy water. Despite walking quite a distance, he hasn't seen a single living creature, just endless grass that isn't even edible. Once night falls, he thinks about his options. If things don't improve, he plans to head to a village and find work that lets him help people, since that was his parents' final wish. He falls asleep this way, but at dawn he's woken up by someone pounding on his shelter, a girl demanding to know who he is and what he's doing there. He answers that his name is Diaz and that he's here because he has nowhere to sleep. His painfully serious answer makes the girl think he's an idiot, and Diaz doesn't deny it, admitting he never received an education. She then asks about his goal, and he replies that he was sent here and his current objective is simply not to die. His blunt honesty makes her suspicious, so Diaz clarifies further. He wants to fulfill his parents' dying wish and protect the weak. That's his only goal. At that moment, the girl's horn begins to glow, apparently because Diaz is telling the truth. She asks whether he's friend or foe, and he admits he doesn't know since he just met her. This irritates her, and she demands a clearer answer. Diaz doesn't understand her frustration, but one thing becomes obvious to him. If this is his territory and she's one of his people, of course, she'd be upset not knowing who he is. So Diaz declares that he is her ally, swearing to protect her no matter who she has to face. This makes her horn glow even more intensely. Diaz still doesn't understand what's happening, but he's taken away without any explanation. Poor guy. Nobody tells him anything. He's brought to a village where everyone is stunned at the sight of him, while Diaz himself can't believe he never noticed this place before. He's introduced to the tribe's leader, who asks the girl Alna whether she saw any red in the glow. Alna answers that it was an intense blue instead. Based on what she's heard, the leader asks Diaz whether being Alna's ally also means being hers. He says yes, and that includes the whole village, explaining that the king ordered him to come to these lands to serve as their lord. Hearing this, Alna aims her bow at him. The leader tells her to lower it since she still wants to speak with Diaz, and asks him to explain from the beginning how the king came to give him this order. Diaz's story starts from his earliest memories, back when his parents were still alive. His mother always told him to find work that helps people, and his father told him to grow strong enough to defend the weak. These were their final wishes since both died in an epidemic, leaving Diaz on his own at age 10. He banded together with other orphans, earning money by cleaning the city or hunting weak monsters. From then on, Diaz lived his life trying to fulfill that last wish. At 15, war broke out, and enemy soldiers quickly reached a neighboring town. Without hesitation, he enlisted to defend everyone, and it was only then that he discovered his talent for combat, winning battle after battle. The war ended 20 years later, and at age 35, His Majesty granted him this territory. Having heard his story, the elderly leader acknowledges that he seems genuinely willing to protect his people. But she poses another question. What would he do if someone wasn't part of his people? Would he still consider them an ally? Diaz answers that naturally they'd be neighbors sharing the same plains, so he would help them if they had problems. At that, the leader's horn begins to glow, and after nodding with a smile, Alna lowers her weapon. Confused by all this, Diaz asks why they even asked him that, since he assumed anyone living there was already his people. But as he says this, something clicks. Seeing that he's figured it out, the leader confirms it. They are not his people. Quite the opposite. They are enemies of his king, having fought against his kingdom for many years. Hearing this, Diaz falls into thought. Poor Diaz dropped into hostile territory without knowing it. But then the leader raises the possibility that they might not be enemies after all. Since his glow was blue, a very unusual color, meaning they should be able to get along. She then asks him to look up and listen. She introduces herself as Mole, leader of the Oni tribe, who fought against his kingdom for a long time over control of these plains. She explains that 50 years ago, the Oni lost a major battle and were forced to flee the area. Dias asks how they're still living there if they fled. Mole reveals that by accumulating mana in their horns, they can cast various spells, including a concealment spell that lets them hide the entire village and erase all trace of their presence. Dias realizes this is why he was unable to find them the day before, but then asks whether it's really safe to tell someone from the enemy kingdom all this. Mole makes clear she wouldn't have told him if he weren't blue. She then reveals the existence of a spell called Soul Assessment, which produces 3 possible colors. Red signals danger or hostility, white means harmless, and blue represents someone who brings blessings. If the person lies even a little, the glow turns murky and shifts toward red. But that never happened with Dias, not even once, which convinces her that he's an honest fool. It's an insult, sure, but a flattering one, and it's also surprising since she's never seen anyone else make it to his age while still following through on his parents' dying wish. Dias decides to take it as a compliment, though he isn't entirely sure that's what it was. Mole notes that she has in fact been complimenting him for a while now. Setting the jokes aside, she tells him she'll give him her full support to become a great feudal lord. She clarifies that her people won't be his subjects, but they will offer him shelter, food, and even some livestock. In exchange, she asks that he tell no one about the village's existence, especially not the king. Dias reassures her that he has nothing against them, and as long as they don't seek conflict with the kingdom, he has no problem with them living there. Mole then informs him that Alna will stay with him for a while to help him out, meaning they'll be living together while she teaches him how things work around here. Alna immediately starts protesting, asking what that's supposed to mean. Mole reminds her that she's the one who brought him here, so she needs to take responsibility. With no other option, Alna reluctantly agrees. We then see the two of them standing in front of his new house. Dias is stunned that the other Oni had already nearly finished building it by the time they arrived. Alna explains that whenever a threat capable of breaking through the concealment spell gets close, they take their houses apart and flee, which is why they live in structures called yurts. Once the house is finished, Dias and Alna sit down to talk, and she tells him food will be brought later, along with the BA. Confused. Dias asks what that last thing is, and Alna explains it's livestock. She adds that if he breeds the pairs and grows the herd, he'll have a steady source of income. Dias thanks her for the information, then asks if she could teach him how to grow his village. Alna's expression shifts, and she asks if he really thinks she'd know how to do that. She also questions why he'd even want subjects in his current state, since all he has is one yurt and food for himself. Visibly deflated, Dias is then handed a sack of matabi powder by Alna, a substance that, when scattered around an area, attracts monsters. And depending on how many he catches, he can earn another yurt. So we see our protagonist standing out in the middle of nowhere. Once there, he dumps out the entire sack and soon hears a stampede of buffalo-like beasts approaching without any fear. Dias raises his axe and starts cutting them down. Here we learn that his fighting style basically amounts to following his instincts and swinging his axe as hard as possible. After wiping out the stampede, he's disappointed that he only managed to catch about half the herd, but then realizes a bigger problem. He has no way to carry that many back at once. Later that afternoon, as he returns carrying one buffalo, he worries that Alna will scold him again for fighting recklessly without thinking about transportation. Yeah, he's kind of an idiot when he arrives. Alna is shocked that his very first hunt yielded a black gi. Dias tells her he actually killed far more than that, but had no way to bring them all back. Almost alarmed, she asks how many he killed, and he reveals it was somewhere between 30 and 40. A number that's almost unheard of. With this, Dias earns real respect from both Alna and the tribe's leader. Having proven his manliness, the men are called to go retrieve all the Gii Dias hunted, and this is the first time Alna refers to him by name. Dias asks the leader what exactly manliness means, and she explains it's a man's worth measured by his ability to work and provide. Dias understands somewhat, but asks what that has to do with Alna's good mood. The leader explains that, as an adult woman, it's only natural she'd be pleased by such displays of manliness. Dias then asks if that also makes him more attractive, even without looks or charm. The leader tells him that's nonsense. Beauty doesn't put food on the table. And honestly, what a statement. Anything unrelated to manliness holds no value to the women of the tribe. Since Alna is both beautiful and hardworking, the greatest gift she could offer would be to marry him. A nervous Dias replies that he has no such intentions. The next day, he wakes up to find that Alna made him breakfast. He compliments how delicious it is, which makes her blush, and he ends up blushing too out of reflex. Changing the subject, Alna asks what he plans to hunt today. Even though he brought back a huge amount of food yesterday, he'll need a well and a latrine if he wants to attract more people, since he won't be able to pay the people building the houses otherwise. Dias considers going to hunt more black gi, but Alna suggests he shouldn't keep bringing back the same thing and recommends hunting monsters instead. Dias points out that monster meat isn't edible due to the miasma, but their claws, horns, and magic stones are valuable. Alna mentions there aren't many monsters nearby, but she can locate them using magic, and suggests they hunt together. At first, Dias refuses, saying it's too dangerous, but Alna wins him over with her enthusiasm. Later, we see Dias grooming the Bia, since their wool is worth more than their meat. That's when the men arrive with the supplies he requested, and unlike before, they approach him cheerfully thanks to his impressive display of manliness. Alna then steps out of the house dressed differently, surprising everyone with how different she looks, and leaves the Bia in the men's care so she can spend the whole day with Dias. Yeah, that's definitely a jealousy trigger. Dias immediately feels the hateful stares from the other men and asks that they head out to hunt as soon as possible. They arrive at a rocky area, and Dias asks if this is really the right spot. Alna tells him not to worry, since she'll handle the search. She casts a spell, and after a few seconds detects the presence of a fairly large monster in the distance. Worried for her safety, Dias asks her to wait there while he goes to check it out. Alna reassures him, reminding him she can use concealment, and promises they'll flee together if it turns out to be too strong. Though hesitant, Dias agrees when he reaches the monster. Alna is stunned to realize it's an earth dragon. Dias, however, just sees it as an oversized turtle and goes to strike it. When he does, his weapon cracks, revealing just how tough its shell is. He goes for its head, but the creature retreats into its shell, protecting its weak points. From a distance, Alna screams at him to flee immediately, but Dias refuses and climbs back onto the shell to keep attacking. After a long stretch of relentless strikes, his axe cracks further. But this isn't really a problem, since Dias immediately repairs it. Alna is amazed by this. Dias explains that he obtained this axe after defeating a shogun from a neighboring country, and that beyond its lion-like shape, it can repair minor damage whenever he wills it. He keeps attacking the creature until he's fairly worn out. When he turns to check on Alna, he sees she's been affected by the monster's miasma. Worried for her safety, he considers heading back, so he delivers one final blow, and this time he actually manages to break through the shell. The dragon reveals itself and charges up a fireball, but Dias stops it by slicing through part of its neck. He then dodges the monster's attacks until suddenly one of its fireballs strikes toward Alna, revealing that she was its actual target. Dias immediately leaps in, remembering the vow he made to protect her, and uses everything he has to finish off the creature. After defeating the massive beast, Alna runs to Dias in tears and embraces him, and in his arms she tells him she'll marry him. The riding party arrives at the fight scene. Two villagers sent by the leader who wanted them to track down the couple since it was getting late, only to walk in on the marriage proposal. After this, everyone brings the Earth Dragon back, spreading the news that Dias defeated it. He downplays it, asking if it's really that big a deal, but Mole shows up to praise his impressive feat. Dias asks if this is enough to cover a well and a latrine, and the leader tells him that just one leg of the beast would be enough to build plenty more than that. In fact, the creature's value far exceeds anything the village could normally offer. In exchange, they can butcher the beast for him, and on top of that, provide the well, the latrine materials for a yurt, supplies, and medicinal herbs. All of that just from one dragon, which sounds perfect to Dias, until Mole mentions that the rest of the beast will serve as Alna's wedding gift. Dias freezes and asks what she means, and Mole simply repeats that he's getting married, whether he likes it or not. After all, having a neighbor capable of killing dragons is more than a little intimidating, so it's best to form strong ties. And this feat has more than proven his manliness. If he doesn't marry Alna, some other woman will come after him instead, which is essentially already happening. Regardless, Alna has already gone to talk to her parents, so he doesn't have much choice. Dias asks if they could at least leave it as an engagement for now, but the Oni aren't really used to that kind of arrangement. Still, he can choose when the wedding happens, and the sooner they solidify the bond, the easier it'll be for the tribe to support him as their lord. Dias asks why forming this bond matters so much to her, and she explains that a lord like him is rare. The previous one was a fool who died recently from illness. With that, she leaves, wishing him luck. Dias then asks some villagers how old Alna is, and learns she's 15 and already old enough to marry. Given the age gap, he could practically be her father, and back in the kingdom, the minimum marrying age was 18 anyway, so he decides they'll marry 3 years from now. Enough time for him to become a proper lord. While thinking this over, Alna arrives to tell him they've reached an agreement and asks what he'd like to eat. He tells her whatever she wants, and just like that, he finds himself in front of a huge buffet with the whole family gathered. Everyone is thrilled about the fine man Alna found, while Dias keeps insisting it's just an engagement. A few days later, we learn the protagonist now has 4 wells and a latrine, meaning he can finally start taking in more people. The big question now is where he's supposed to find those people, right? When Alna shows up to report that she's detected a monster to the north. It's not particularly large, but it's heading their way, so Dias decides to eliminate it before it arrives, and naturally, Alna wants to come too. They're worried the BA might get scared and run off, so some villagers arrive just in time to be left in charge of watching them. The monster turns out to be an ogre. Alna suggests letting it pass, but since it's heading straight for them, they have no real choice. Both of them charge toward it. Alna fires an arrow while Dias closes the distance, but the creature proves surprisingly agile. Alna manages to pin its foot down with an arrow, letting Dias catch up and finish it off. Once the monster is dead, Alna goes to congratulate him, but while talking, she catches the disgusting stench coming off him and sends him to bathe and clean his armor. The next day, Dias is thinking back on everything that happened, wondering how he's supposed to attract more subjects, when Alna shows up with good news. Francis is pregnant. Hearing this, he rushes to the pen to congratulate the little one, though this makes Francis jealous, so he ends up joining in too. Alna mentions that not everything about this is good news. She reminds him that the BE are quite intelligent and understand human speech, which makes them emotionally sensitive during pregnancy, to the point where fear alone can overwhelm and kill them. To prevent that, the strongest member of the herd needs to stay close by, meaning both BA will need to sleep in the yurt, which will inevitably make it dirty and smelly. She mentions that some men can't stand that at all. After hearing all this, Dias tells her it's not a problem, since both BA are an important part of his family. Touched by his big heart, Alna happily calls him the best husband. At that point, the Bia start talking with Alna, who blushes and insists they haven't done anything yet. Dias understands exactly what they're implying and just covers his face. Right then, Alna's horn starts glowing. She tells Dias that there are humans on horseback nearby. Dias decides to go take a look and asks her to use concealment. On the way there, he wonders whether they might be enemies, in which case he'll need to be careful until a knight recognizes him. And Dias realizes it's Klaus. Both are happy to see each other, and Dias asks what brings him out here. Klaus explains he came as an escort for a young lady who apparently has business with him. Dias doesn't recognize her, and Klaus asks if they could rest at his estate. So they head to his humble little house. Dias explains that he had the village concealed except for his own home in order to protect the Oni's secret without having to explain anything. The young lady thanks him for taking them in and introduces herself as the third princess, Diane, asking whether his estate is still under construction, since she doesn't see any servants either. Dias, quite casually, calls her by her first name, which infuriates one of the guards for not addressing her properly as Your Highness. Diane, however, says she's fine with it. Dias explains that this house is literally all he has, and that he worked hard just to build it, which surprises Diane. She asks what happened to the construction workers since the king was supposedly supposed to provide him a reward and funds to get settled. Dias tells her he never received a single coin. He was simply dropped off here with no water and no food. Everyone is shocked to hear this, and Klaus is furious. Dias then asks what business brought them all the way out here, forcing her to travel for a full month. Diane explains it's about the war. Rumors are spreading in the capital about a new conflict breaking out, and she came to ask Dias for help since he's the hero who once saved the kingdom. As a reward, she offers her hand in marriage, or that of Prinesia or Meralda, the guards accompanying her. Dias, however, has zero interest in any of this. He's perfectly content with his Bia. Marrying a stranger doesn't appeal to him either, and he flatly states he has no intention of returning to any war. He also can't send troops, since, as she can clearly see, he doesn't even have servants. Annoyed, Diane asks him to reconsider, but he gives a firm no. The guard from earlier stands up, furious at his disrespect, but when he draws his sword, Dias shatters it, leaving the poor man's hand completely numb. With nothing left to say, Dias tells them to leave. Klaus immediately agrees, knowing full well no one could ever hope to defeat the kingdom's great hero. Diane storms off, absolutely furious. Dias stays behind in the yurt, worrying about how he's going to fix the hole in the ground. Certain Alna is going to scold him for it. Meanwhile, Diane seethes over having been rejected, swearing that he'll regret it someday. As Dias watches them leave, Alna appears beside him, mentioning that one of the soldiers glowed an intense blue, while the rest were red and white. Surprised that she appeared out of nowhere, he asks how long she's been there, and she explains that since Francis seemed sad, they came over using concealment. Hearing this, Dias pets the BA as an apology, which makes Alna jealous, so he gives her some affection too. He then asks whether the red glow on the others meant they were hostile toward him. Alna says no now that she thinks about it. She feels the same way about both Francis and Frangua, since they're family too. Dias doesn't argue and agrees with her, though he privately wonders if the intensely blue soldier might have been Klaus. Alna then asks what he plans to do about the hole in the ground. Dias apologizes and promises to fix it. The next day, he wakes up as usual and finds Alna making breakfast. Suddenly, her horn starts glowing, signaling another human's arrival. Dias goes to investigate with Alna and the BA tagging along. When they arrive, they find Klaus, dressed quite differently this time. Dias asks what happened to his armor, and Klaus explains he got discharged from the army. Dias asks if it was his fault, and Klaus says no, he actually got himself discharged on purpose. Now he's here because he wants to work for Dias as a soldier. Dias considers accepting, since Klaus is someone he can trust in battle, but he still checks with Alna first. She appears from behind and says she has no objections. After all, his color has stayed blue this entire time. With Alna's approval, Dias agrees to take him on, but first asks Klaus to come back to the house with him, and that's how Dias landed his very first subject.